Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Two long-running Obama-era investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. Two easy wins now in doubt because there's not enough time. Good job, Jeff.
Well, the president apparently referring to investigations into the GOP Congressman Duncan Hunter and Chris Collins, both indicted last month.
Here to weigh in, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, what was the president trying to say with those tweets? Because it sounds like one thing. I just want to know if you think the same thing I do.
Well, there's two sides to this. One is that the president is the chief law enforcement officer of the land and should have some control over the Justice Department. And this president feels that he has no control over the Justice Department because of the total breakdown in communications between the president and the attorney general. The other side is this is evidence of serious crime here. And there can't be two standards, one for members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, and one for others. It is the duty of the Justice Department to prosecute crimes when they find them and to bring indictments when a grand jury has decided there's enough evidence there. In the case of Congressman Collins from New York, there's an actual tape of him on his cell phone at the White House during a party hosted by President and Mrs. Trump, telling his son, sell the stock, because there was bad news coming in shares of stock that they own. Any father would do that for any son, but it's still a crime, and the Justice Department was right to indict.
Was that a government phone?
I don't know the answer to that if it was a government phone, but he wasn't charged with using government property to further a crime. In the case of Congressman Hunter, this is a very, very serious and sad story of the degeneration of a member of Congress who comes from a great family. His father held that congressional seat for many years. This was the use of campaign funds for personal, below-the-radar screen reasons. It did start in the Obama administration. That is, the acts that the government alleges occurred while Barack Obama was president and continued into the presidency of Donald Trump. The Justice Department would have been most unwise had it waited until after the midterm elections to pop these indictments.
Judge, here's the thing. Did they have these conclusions in June? Did they have them in May? Do we know that?
We don't know the answer to that.
That's what the president's saying.
Correct. But when the president says these things, he basically, I want you to use the Justice Department to help the Republican Party. That is fodder for the cannon of Bob Mueller and the never-Trumpers and all those who wish the president ill. It's his using his own words out of his own mouth to help put him in a box of the use of government for political purposes.
And if the Republicans lose the House, then he's blaming Jeff Sessions.
Exactly. Exactly. Where this goes, I don't know.
It is Wednesday, the 5th of September of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. It's only an egg dish with hollandaise. Believe me. Yeah, we don't have any secret codes or handshakes or little, used to be an okay sign. But now we surreptitiously, or not so surreptitiously, flash our gang sign on national television when your right-wing white nationalist judge is being confirmed. Did you notice how they replaced her with Condoleezza Rice? I love that. Yeah. Especially when he was up there talking about how he was coaching the girls' whatever team that he coaches. Drives around in his carpool. Yeah, he's that kind of a dad. Not so good of a dad that he would shake the hand of a murdered, the father of a murdered child. Because those people are obviously obsessed with their grief. How unseemly. Well, we know where they all come from. We got Zena Bash flashing the Pepe sign. Her husband used official U.S. attorney stationery to lambaste anybody who would dare consider that they had never heard or even seen of this sign before, except for the fact that it was already a scandal many times over in the Oval Office, in the White House, even Stephen Miller doing it. They didn't know. They knew. Their funding. She comes from means. She does. The term that I heard is that she's filthy rich. As well as being one of the most beautiful, treasonous Nazis in town. And I got to tell you, Tomi Lahren is going to be pissed when she hears that. Well, Fox and Friends are so dejected. Yeah, it may be. It may be Woodward is right that Trump's lawyer warned Trump, you're going to be in jail in an orange jumpsuit. And it may be, and it may be true. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I hope. I can only hope. Okay? Hope for that change. Fox and Friends are dejected about that. And why wouldn't they? I mean, they're on the gravy train. And I got to tell you, fascism has always sold. Sold well, too. But I have a suspicion that this Donald Trump fiasco, call me a conspiracy theorist, but hear me out. What if this is only a test run? Put in an absolute incompetent that everybody hates, and look all the destruction this guy has wrought. What if we get a competent fascist in place that's able to make the trains run on time? The munitions factories going at top-notch speed, everybody making a lot of money. Burgers in this village, burgers in that village, everybody's happy. Here, let's have a beer hall. Okay, we will. And you'll sing jolly songs about nationalism. It sells. But what happens then? I mean, we have an absolute incompetent crazy man as a test run. And look what's happened. Yeah, home of the brave. That's not to say that there were individual acts of bravery on a mass scale, especially during World War II, by our grandfathers, and in some cases our fathers. But I'm talking about we as a nation. Remember the color-coded terrorist alerts? Oh my God, people were just into that. Home of the brave. Give me a break. We're motivated by fear. Fear of the other. Fear of nuclear annihilation. Fear of, black, brown people. Fear. Fear sells. And fascism, come on. They market in fear. It's how they get what they want. Oh, I'm just going off. Look at the time. What's on the rest of the menu here? On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Smothered Benedict Wednesday's special. Yes, EPA watchdog tallied up Scott Pruitt's security costs and found that he spared no expense. Of course he wouldn't. Grifter. U.S. apple farmers are afraid they will be hurt by the U.S.-China trade battle, and I don't blame them. And with rising sea levels, Bangkok struggles to stay afloat. Yeah, tell that to the climate change deniers. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Trump will chair a UN Security Council meeting on Iran this month during the annual gathering of world leaders in New York. He's going to be up there with a gavel. Can you? The UN. Oh, how embarrassing. Well, I don't know. Maybe he'll bang his shoe on the podium. And what are the wildest things Jon Kyl actually tried to argue for? Oh, let us count the ways. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Of course, you will notice the chat room link over there on the rightish of the page, diligently monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who is still in the midst of rebuilding her studio. So if you could go directly to her and give her some funds to help her affect that, that would be very wonderful. I should also mention she and Ricky will have a show this Saturday, the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, yes. And that is at midnight on the East Coast, 9 p.m. on the West Coast. So tune into that. They've figured out a way in which to be able to do their show, and they're going to have one. So good. But do check out Kelly personally. She could use your help. And thank you. And I should also thank you for taking a gander over to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, because that's where the contribute donate buttons are, and your generosity by, per using those buttons and where they take you, keeps the lights a-blinking in their proper order. And for me, it's like 4 steady ones and 1 blinking. I like that. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Check us out over on Facebook. Kelly's been taking care of the Facebook Live app there, so check that out. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I'm also on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. And that is where I post the show notes and links diary for each show about 10 minutes before showtime. You can follow the show on Facebook at, as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But over there on Twitter, they gave us at Cookbook West. And that's my fault. I'll take responsibility because somehow I missed something. But do. And you can pick up podcasts of the show by way of iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube. Okay, well, let's get on with Scott Pruitt spending a lot of money on his security measures. E.A. Crunden from Think Progress brings us this first article here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Former EPA head Scott Pruitt racked up outside security costs during his tenure with the EPA, more than doubling the amount incurred by his predecessor. A long-awaited watchdog report confirms in just 11 months, Pruitt spent $3.5 million in taxpayer dollars, actually, on just security. That was just security. We're not talking about what he spent finding a particular hand lotion at the Ritz. Or trying, I don't know, what is this other thing? He was like collecting sheets. used sheets off of hotel beds at Trump properties. Ugh. Ugh. Weird. Maybe he was putting it in that soundproofed cone of silence that he had. The bubble thing that had, I say it was a direct link to God. Okay. He's thinking he was talking to God in that bubble. And he needed the Trump sheets for some sort of, I don't know, exorcism ritual? I can't figure it out. Yeah, just creepy. Well, 2 months after Pruitt's resignation, a 60-page report from the EPA's Office of Inspector General found that the controversial Trump administration official far exceeded the security expenses typical for his office during his time with the agency. Now, this is good for us. I got to tell you, these kinds of facts and figures and outrages, it works for us. Trust me. Bring any of this up, show them the actual papers to the MAGA hatters. They don't care. First of all, it's a fake document that you're proposing. Oh, a government agency did this? The EPA's watchdog? Well, they're part of the deep state. Or whatever excuse it is to not ever take into consideration how crooked every... And in fact, we are the evil ones by putting out this fake news about how crooked they all are. I sometimes throw around the term brainwashing, like, oh, wow, looks like the brainwashing works. But what brainwashing, the kind of concept of brainwashing does is that it absolves the subject of any responsibility for thinking like, I don't know what. The brainwashed? Yeah, brainwashing is an easy excuse. All right. Banality of evil, I guess that's one way of putting it. How about craven and evil? Right down to their little dirty fingernails. MAGA hatters. Now, not all of them have dirty fingernails. Some of them are quite lovely, like Zena Bash doing her Pepe symbol. The increase in costs, the report notes, was due primarily to the new 24-hour, 7-day-a-week protection required by the Office of the Administrator and increased costs to travel first class. I don't know. Wouldn't you put your security... No, you actually have to have your security staff up in first class, too. You can't put them in coach. They're too far away. What if something happens? And the reason he needed this when he traveled is because, I don't know, some evil member of the unwashed dared ask him a question about... Actually, it was a mother with a child who said... Why are you putting lead and mercury and all this other stuff in the water? And he says, I'm not doing that. I'm just taking money from the people who do. You can't blame me. It's not personal. It's business. The OIG report further breaks down the comparison between Pruitt and McCarthy, who was part of the Obama administration and, you know, had like a mill or something. I mean, more than half. He was like, Pruitt just went over the top. Let's see, what is this here? The Obama administration official had 6 full-time protection service detail agents providing portal-to-portal coverage or door-to-door service. Pruitt, by contrast, had 19 full-time agents providing 24-hour-a-day protection 7 days a week. Well, that's draining the swamp of all the money and putting it in somebody else's hands. Probably some I don't know, somebody who writes in Cyrillic is what I think. These guys all owe. Pruitt's heightened security costs taxpayers. The report also notes that agents worked overtime without proper authorization, culminating in improper payments of, well, just a little under $110,000 during the period between January of 2016 and March of 2017. Well, that's not very much for 19 agents working full-time when you think about it. Overall, the report concludes, Pruitt's security use was an undocumented decision and an inefficient use of agency resources undertaken without a threat analysis by the EPA to determine if the administrator in fact required extra security. Failure to properly justify the level of protective services provided to the administrator has allowed costs to increase. from 1.6 million to 3.5 million in just 11 months, the report states. Well, Pruitt and every single one of his ilk don't think the OIG has any authority over them. They're the princes. They're the sheriffs of Nottingham. They make the laws, not some bureaucrat. Chris Prentice in New York, Venus Wu in Hong Kong, Yawen Shen in Beijing, and they all report with Reuters. Brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Apple farmers across the U.S. Northwest fear they will be the next victims of a U.S.-China trade war that left cherry growers in the same region with weak prices and having to scramble for alternative buyers because of prohibitive Chinese tariffs. As an example, I have to have these small little debates at Black Bear Diner with a bunch of MAGA hatters saying how great the economy is doing because of hair fever. And, well, tell that to the cherry growers and the apple farmers. Donald Trump has dealt a blow to farmers this year with strong-arm trade tactics that have prompted retaliation from key markets in U.S. products, including the sweet cherries and apples that speckle landscapes across the western United States from summer through autumn. We'd like this to be settled right away, but it doesn't seem like it will be, so we're just holding on, said Ray Norwood, Director of Sales and Marketing for Oval Fruit Company, a Washington grower of cherries and apples. The apple is the state's top agricultural crop, representing some $2 billion to $2.5 billion in sales each year. Well, Washington didn't vote for Trump. They have to be made to suffer, don't you know? While the bulk of these apples are consumed domestically, about 30% are exported and are vulnerable to tariffs. China is the world's largest producer of the fruit, but it has also become a major destination for U.S.-grown varieties like Red Delicious and Gala apples, according to industry experts. They love the red. Cherry producers, which happen to be red, which ship about a third of their fragile and highly perishable crop overseas, saw shipments held up at Chinese ports and ultimately slapped with prohibitive duties in the harvest, which ran through mid-August. That had a notable impact on the fruit company's bottom line, Norwood said. Well, yeah. The company had to lower prices and find alternative destinations as China is one of the top 3 export markets for about 80% of the farm's cherry sales. One Shanghai-based fruit retailer said many cherries went to Hong Kong instead of mainland China. Prices there dropped from an average of about $6.40 U.S. per pound to as low as, about $2 per pound in a landmark century-old fruit market in Kowloon's Yaomate district. Growers of apples and other specialty crops are worried they may experience the same fate that cherry growers and shippers already faced, having to scramble for alternative buyers at lower prices because steep duties imposed by China, India, and Mexico make their products too expensive for those markets. Only the best people. Only the best thinking. Gee, if it wasn't for all that thinking, think how bad things would be. Well, the same uncertainty is plaguing growers of almonds, pistachios, pears, peaches, and other produce and high-value crops. The direct impact of tariffs on U.S. fruit, vegetable, and tree nut sales is expected to swell to more than $2.6 billion U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue unveiled a $12 billion aid package last week that included $1.2 billion for the purchase of apples, pears, pistachios, and other such crops, but farmers said is likely not enough. Dennis Nuxall, Vice President of Federal Affairs for the Western Growers in Washington, D.C., by the way, said the group never expected U.S. Department of Agriculture to make up for growers' losses, but had hoped for more direct assistance. You know, like trying to lessen the tariffs on the 3 largest markets that your growers in the state that did not vote for Trump. Mexico, India, and China are expected to have duties in place during the shipping season, representing about half of total U.S. export volumes of the fruit. The global apple market is very competitive. Even if the tariffs are lifted, it'll be harder for the apple producers to get back into those markets. Agence France Press brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. As Bangkok prepares to host climate change talks, the sprawling city of more than 10 million is itself under siege from the environment, with dire forecasts warning it could be partially submerged in just over a decade. A preparatory meeting begins next Tuesday in Thailand's capital for the next UN climate conference, a crunch summit in Poland at the end of 2018 to set rules on reducing greenhouse emissions and providing aid to vulnerable countries. As temperatures rise, abnormal weather patterns like more powerful cyclones, erratic rainfall, and intense droughts and floods are predicted to worsen over time, adding pressure on governments tasked with bringing the 2015 Paris Climate Treaty to life. Bangkok, built on once marshy land about 5 feet above sea level, is projected to be one of the world's hardest hit urban areas, alongside fellow Southeast Asian behemoths Jakarta and Manila. Nearly 40% of Bangkok will be inundated by as early as 2030 due to extreme rainfall and changes in weather patterns, according to a World Bank report. And, they're not, flaming, irrationalists. These are conservative thinkers because it's money. Currently, the capital is sinking 1 to 2 centimeters a year, and there is risk of massive flooding in the near future. Now, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that rather than sinking, they happen to be just, the water level from the sea is rising, filling in the marsh. Seas in the nearby Gulf of Thailand are rising by 4 millimeters a year above the global average. There you go. The city is already largely under sea level. In 2011, when the monsoon season brought the worst floods in decades, a fifth of the city was underwater. The business district was spared thanks to hastily constructed dikes. But the rest of Thailand was not so fortunate, and the death toll passed 500 by the end of the season. Experts say unchecked urbanization and eroding shorelines will leave Bangkok and its residents in critical condition. And I'm looking at you, Florida. Let's get on to our break, and when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Unconverted. The action in the screen adaptation of Emily Danforth's novel, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, doesn't take long to get started. When Montana high school junior Cameron is caught in the backseat of a car at a school dance with another girl, her religious aunt decides to whisk her off to a creepy remote so-called therapy center called God's Promise. Though set in 1993, Cameron, partly as a result of being a teen and partly as a result of being gay, quickly scopes out the absurdity of the situation. She finds a hyperbolically butch roommate, Aaron, and some other students, called disciples here, who've drunk the Kool-Aid, and a few like-minded friendlies with whom she commiserates and smokes weed, and, of course, the two Christian platitude-spouting therapists. One of these is Reverend Rick, who claims unconvincingly that their methods cured him of his SSA. That's Christian for same-sex attraction. The more pernicious of the two, though, is Rick's older sister, Lydia March, with a doctor in front of her name, played by Jennifer L. True to its prestigious award at Sundance, the performances here are all good, but Chloe Grace Moretz's portrayal of Cameron is breakout. And from the intense close-ups on Cameron's face to the whole tenor of the film, director Desiree Akhavan deserves credit for keeping the movie human. The adults here aren't portrayed as monsters, though Lydia is close and there is one incident. They're mostly clueless and making it up as they go along. The kids likewise aren't heroes, they're lost, and just beginning a journey as the credits roll. Sadly, the, quote, teaching of kids to hate who they are, as Cameron puts it in The Miseducation of Cameron Post, isn't confined to the dustbin of history yet, and it's still legal in 41 states. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Physicists concern themselves with problems that are profound. The origins of the universe, the nature of time, the composition of matter. And then there's spaghetti. A pasta problem has perplexed physicists as celebrated as Richard Feynman, and has even been awarded an Ig Nobel Prize. At issue?
Why spaghetti doesn't break into 2 pieces, why it breaks into 3 pieces or more.
Ronald Heiser, now a grad student at Cornell, decided to explore the misbehavior of spaghetti for an undergraduate math course he took at MIT. Now, you may never have noticed it, but it's nearly impossible to break a single dry piece of spaghetti in half. Feynman allegedly noodled with the puzzle, and Heiser became similarly possessed.
I'm a little bit of a contrarian person, so I thought it would be fun to try and break it into 2, because no one said you couldn't do that. They just said why it doesn't break into 2.
In fact, the French researchers, who were awarded the Ig Nobel Prize in 2006, found that when spaghetti is bent evenly from both ends, it will crack near the center, where the stick is most curved. But this initial break sets up a vibrational wave that quickly fractures the rod further, so you get multiple fragments. What Heiser wondered was whether he could somehow get around this vibrational snapback effect, and he found you have to do the twist. Heiser built a device for torquing his pasta with precision, and he observed the resulting fragmentation with a high-speed camera. He discovered that introducing a twist of around 360 degrees to the long strand allowed him to produce the desired single pair of pasta pieces. That's where Vishal Patil, a grad student in mathematics at MIT, comes in.
So I first heard about this spaghetti problem from co-authors Ronald Heiser and Professor Jon Kyl when I first arrived at MIT. And after hearing about this problem, I became interested in developing mathematical models for the fracture of this elastic rod. And in particular, to see if using this model you could find out ways to control the fracture in the rod.
Controlling fractures is a big issue in materials science, and could have applications in everything from the design of highways and bridges to the engineering of nanotubes. Pottle's modeling showed that twisting the spaghetti dampens the snapback effect. That's because once a twisted stick is broken, it will try to unwind. This rapid unwinding creates a twisting wave that basically blocks the vibrational snapback wave, leaving the spaghetti in two clean pieces. The work is served up in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
Although the project was a bit of fun, I think it's quite nice when you can find interesting physics and maths lurking behind everyday, sort of mundane objects.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Welcome to 60-Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Greek philosopher Aristotle was an important thinker about government and political theory whose writings were familiar to the American founders. Aristotle observed that every state or country must perform three functions. First, it must deliberate on the correct course of action for the country and decide how to proceed on matters of public policy. This is called the legislative function. Second, countries must carry out these public policies. This is called the executive function. Third, countries must manage disputes about the interpretation of laws. This is called the judicial function. 18th century French philosopher Montesquieu proposed dividing government into the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, which he called the separation of powers in his book Spirit of the Laws. This inspired the framers of the Constitution, and today the United States has a government with three branches: the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. That's all for today's podcast, 60-Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Workers of America, rejoice! As our nation celebrates Labor Day with backyard cookouts, fun at the beach, or simply kicking back in a lazy boy and doing several rounds of 12-ounce elbow bends, we can all take comfort in the happy news that our economy is whizzing. Economists tell us that job creation is surging, wages are rising, and consumers are racking up record levels of purchases. What's not to like about all that? Two things. First, the economists' claim about wage growth is a sham, covering up the shame that top corporate executives and major shareholders are grabbing nearly all of the economic gains produced by America's entire workforce. The so-called nominal wage, i.e. the sum that workers see on their paychecks, has risen only 2.7% in the past year, a very mediocre result for the 82% of the labor force who are non-managerial worker bees. Second, that nominal wage is not the worker's real wage, for it doesn't take into account the very real fact that consumer price increases eat up the buying power of people's paychecks. Indeed, while nominal wages are up 2.7% in recent months, the price of everything from gasoline to groceries is up by 2.9%, effectively slapping working families with a wage cut. Sure, the economy is whizzing on the working class. This is Jim Hightower saying, so all the rejoicing on this Labor Day is coming from the gated zip codes of the rich. For example, in the same year that workers took a pay cut, the CEOs of America's 350 largest corporations had an 18% jump in their pay, hauling in an average of $18.9 million each. In a lifetime of labor, the typical American worker would not be paid as much as those honchos took in 1 year. Those few are getting rich enough to air-condition hell, and I think they'd better be pooling their money for that project.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. In the United Kingdom, unions are putting more pressure on the government to clarify its objectives in negotiating an exit from the European Union, the so-called Brexit. One of the largest unions in the country, the GMB, has called for the public to have a say in the final result of negotiations with the EU. Tim Roach is the GMB's General Secretary.
As a trade unionist, I'm used to negotiating deals for GMB members. Sitting on the sidelines watching the mess this government is making of Brexit is infuriating because there's so much at stake. GMB respects the result of the referendum, but how we leave the EU is as important as the decision to leave in the first place. That's why today GMB is calling for a public vote on the final deal. As trade unionists, when we negotiate a pay deal with an employer, we go back to our members and ask them if they're happy with it, whether they want to accept or reject it. That's what people deserve now, because the promises that were made during the referendum campaign are simply not the reality we are facing. GMB members in manufacturing, ports, chemicals, energy, retail, public services across the entire economy are facing uncertainty and a government more preoccupied with internal divisions than working people's livelihoods. People voted for change. They voted to take back control. They did not vote for economic chaos or to put jobs and hard-won rights on the line. A Tory hard Brexit would be a disaster for GMB members. The government need to know they have to come back and face the music. They can't sell working people down the river. That's why GMB supports your right to decide what sort of Brexit is the right Brexit. That's why we support a public vote on the final deal.
The organisation which represents UK unions at the national level, the Trades Union Congress, is also expressing support for public approval of whatever results come out of the UK-EU negotiations. But it is sticking to its original position that whatever happens, the rights and working conditions of workers in the country should be protected. Frances O'Grady is the General Secretary of the TUC. She spoke to a parliamentary committee about the need for more clarity in the Brexit negotiations.
What I would like to hear is some clarity about what the real priorities are for the people of this country. And clearly we're arguing those priorities, the bottom line should be jobs and rights. That's what matters to people. Politically, clearly the Prime Minister has a challenge. I think she has to reach over the heads of her hardliners in her own cabinet and appeal to the country, because I think the country needs to be prepared for those pragmatic trades and compromises that will need to be made. And finally, I would say that she needs to be clear about tackling the root causes of people's concerns, because certainly immigration was a big debate. We can't pretend it wasn't. But the more I've gone around the country, and in the last couple of weeks I've been to Birmingham, Newcastle, Barnsley, the Northeast, talking to people about immigration, people believe that people should be paid the rate for the job wherever they come from, and that employers shouldn't be allowed to undercut. And if we could tackle that and some of the pressure on our schools and hospitals, I think we could have a very different debate.
Ms. O'Grady was asked about the possibility of the UK joining trade agreements other than the one it currently has with the EU.
We're in a global economy. You combine to boost your bargaining power. This was part of the TUC's assessment in looking at where our best options lie. The question for us is that the single market, the EU single market, is the only bloc that provides a voice for working people and a level of protection for working people that we think is worth having. No other bloc does that. That's the difference. We're going to have to play by somebody's rules. It's just whose rule.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. This broadcast is on holiday until September 10th, but instead of airing reruns, we've asked some go-to foreign policy experts what they'll be paying attention to in the weeks to come. Jonah Blank is a senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation and has been watching as Pakistan's brand new prime minister tries to find his feet.
His name is Imran Khan, and he is quite a celebrity in his own right. He is Pakistan's most famous athlete. He led Pakistan's cricket team back in the early 1990s to its most important victory in cricket history over the colonial master of Britain. He is essentially Pakistan's version of Michael Jordan. However, after spending 20 years as the habitué of nightclubs in London and Biarritz perhaps and other hot spots in Europe, he has rebranded himself as an austere and pious champion of religion and of virtue in public life.
Even if that's not a sincere instance of seeing the light, Blank says it's good Pakistan now has a third consecutive civilian prime minister and another peaceful transition of power. But there are signs that with Imran Khan, as with his predecessors, Pakistan's military isn't far out of the frame. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
The military had a very heavy hand in his election. From a U.S. perspective, it's bad because so many of the difficulties of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship are directly attributable to the role of the Pakistani military in Pakistani society. After all, let's remember, where was Osama bin Laden found hiding? In Abbottabad, right next door to Pakistan's version of West Point.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. I should give fair warning, it looks like we have some tree work about to be worked on here in the neighborhood. So if you hear some inordinate noise, it's because, well, I can only soundproof the mothership as well as I could. All right, let's begin along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America for weather around the world. And it is currently 50 degrees. We're getting into the fall range of our weather now, it looks like. We will be a tad warmer than yesterday. We'll be in the mid-90s, maybe a tad hotter than that, maybe a tad lower. Winds are currently a negligible 1 mile per hour out of the southwest. We have sunny conditions, and then in a couple of hours, we will maintain sunny conditions throughout the day. By the way, in a few hours, the winds will shift out of the northwest and then blow at their usual clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour, continuing that clip into the evening, with the wind shifting then out of the northwest. Looks like we'll have sunny conditions for a few days at least, and we'll be a tad cooler tomorrow, upper 80s, low 90s. Low pressure is trying to break up the high pressure bubble that we've had for a bit, and that's been working quite well. Right now, pressure is falling at 29.86 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 56%. Ragweed pollen is moderate. The air quality index is good, a little bit up at 43 parts per million from what it was yesterday. It was in the 30s then. That daytime UV index is still in the high range, but now at a tick lower than what it had been previously. Started yesterday, it was at 6, and today it's at 6, but it had been at 7, and before that it had been 8, and before that it had been 9. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 69 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 77 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 82 and sunny. Kiev is 77 and fair. Kabul is 77 and fair. Hong Kong is 79 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 81 and partly cloudy. And they got hit by a big-time typhoon, too, by the way. Sydney, Australia is 53 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, with your continuing high heat advisory. So do take care, drink plenty of fluids, don't make them all Manhattans, okay? Just a few. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. And of course, the tree work is going in full loud noise mode right now, so I apologize for all the background. I'm going to have to abbreviate this show, apparently. I hate that. But we'll see what we can do here. Oh, my God. Okay, this article is out of Reuters. Donald Trump will chair a UN Security Council meeting on Iran this month during the annual gathering of world leaders in New York, diplomats and U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley said yesterday. The U.S., which holds the Council presidency for September, has unsuccessfully pushed the UN to call out Iran. Haley has regularly attacked Iran, accusing it of meddling in the wars in Syria and Yemen. Diplomats at Iran could request to speak at the September 26 Council meeting, the week of the UN General Assembly. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is expected to address the Assembly on the 25th. The Iranian UN mission did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Okay, Zach Ford from Think Progress brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. There's so much noise from sawing and chippers outside right now. It's amazing. I do apologize for that. We're going to have to cut out early, I can tell. But let me try to get through how many wild things that Kyle has argued for. Now, he might be retired from the Senate, but he has been around to help Kavanaugh's nomination anyway, and he is now going to take over McCain's seat. And Kyle has been keeping himself busy since he left the Senate. Among his projects has been lobbying on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry, helping Facebook figure out whether it has a liberal bias, and shepherding Brett Kavanaugh through his nomination process in the Supreme Court. Having served 18 years in the Senate, including 6 years as Senate Minority Whip, Kyle also has a storied record as a staunchly conservative lawmaker. He was one of Obama's most vocal critics, even suggesting he should be impeached over his immigration policies. You know, yeah. Kyl defended Arizona's SB 1070, a controversial law that encouraged racial profiling to identify undocumented immigrants, while he himself opposed any path to citizenship for even those who were brought to the country as children. Oh, he'd fit right in now, and I guess he does. So that's interesting. Kyl also was absolutely against the ACA, and we know about the thumbs down gesture that McCain presented. Well, with so much noise, folks, we're just going to get out of here early. I do apologize. I like to go all the way up and beyond sometimes. But we'll be back here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Stay tuned for breaking news throughout the day as it breaks on Netroots Radio. And we will visit with you tomorrow. In West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.